Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for August 1st, 2018. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing the latest film and TV news. This is Slash Film senior writer Ben Pearson, and joining me on today's episode are Slash Film managing editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
And writer Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
All right, guys. So first up, I just wanted to mention something really quickly that's not like a crazy news item, but something that I figured our listeners might enjoy is that J.J. Abrams has officially joined Twitter. Earlier today, he under the Twitter handle at JJ Abrams, of course, tweeted the first behind-the-scenes photo from Star Wars Episode 9. So I just wanted to throw that out up at the top of the show so people can follow him, because I'm sure we're going to be seeing a glut of Star Wars behind-the-scenes content coming from that account in the days and weeks and months to come. So,
why, Ben? Why would J.J. Abrams join Twitter? Didn't Rian Johnson warn him that it's cesspool of scum and villainy?
He really should have, but and I kind of wonder about that. I wonder if this is something that was like mandated by Disney and Lucasfilm. Do you think that there are like contractual, because like, and I don't mean to derail this conversation before you even really get started, but I remember we were talking a little while ago about how some news came out that like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets X number of dollars. It might be like $1 million per tweet or something. Chris, do you remember this? It wasn't too long ago.
I believe he gets $10 billion a tweet.
That sounds right. That sounds exactly factually accurate. But yeah, it's like anytime he tweets about a movie or something he's involved in, and this is like a practice that's been going on for a long time, but I'm wondering if there are like contractual requirements for visible people, actors and auteur filmmakers like Abrams. I don't know if any of us can answer that question, or if any of our listeners can. Maybe any of our industry insider listeners might be able to send us an email and let us know if they've encountered anything like that. I would be very interested to know the answer to that question. You can send us an email at peter@slashfilm.com if you know the answer. But let's move on and really get into the meat of this episode. And that I want to really start with a news story for a movie that never happened, but one that sounds really intriguing nonetheless. Chris, tell us about a potential Demolition Man sequel.
Yes, so in case you're unaware of what this is, Demolition Man is a film from the 90s where Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes get cryogenically frozen. Sylvester Stallone's a cop, Wesley Snipes is a criminal. They get frozen, and they both wake up in the future. And the future has become this very kind-hearted, super passive world. And unfortunately, Wesley Snipes is still crazy and deadly. So he starts running amok, and they need Sylvester Stallone to stop him because he's the only cop who knows how to do violence anymore. So it was an okay film. It's entertaining, and it has a bit of a cult following still. And it was a hit at the time, but unlike most Sylvester Stallone hits, it never got a sequel. And as it turns out, there almost was a sequel, and it sounds kind of wild. So Daniel Waters, who co-wrote the film, appeared on a podcast recently, the Projection Booth podcast, and he revealed that after Demolition Man came out, Joel Silver, who is a famous producer who produced Demolition Man, came to Daniel Waters and said he had an idea for a sequel, and that sequel would be Sylvester Stallone reconnects with his long-lost daughter, who is now older than him because he's been cryogenically frozen, and the daughter would be played by Meryl Streep. And Daniel Waters basically said, all right, look, if you can get Meryl Streep to do this, I'm in. And obviously we know that didn't happen. It's not clear on how far this went. It's not clear if Joel Silver actually put an offer out to Meryl Streep's agent and said, hey, does Meryl Streep want to be in Demolition Man 2? I somehow doubt that happened, and if it did happen, I have a feeling she shook her head no and laughed, and it didn't happen. But so that's a fun what if. We could have gotten a Demolition Man sequel starring Meryl Streep as Sylvester Stallone's daughter, but it didn't happen.
Jacob, would you have wanted to see something like that?
In the 90s, no, because Meryl Streep of the 90s was still Meryl Streep being serious and delivering all these iconic performances. But Meryl Streep today, the Meryl Streep who starred in Mamma Mia and Devil Wears Prada, who seems to have reached the I don't give a crap, I'm gonna have fun stage of her career. I want to see that Meryl Streep Demolition Man sequel. So make it now, and have them both be roughly the same age now. Who cares? Just make it now.
I mean, yeah, I'm totally down for that. That sounds ridiculous. All right, so let's move on to our next item, and that is that a prequel to The Sandlot is in the works at Fox. Jacob, what's going on with this?
All right, well, it's the 25th anniversary of The Sandlot this year, the really beloved movie about kids in the 60s playing baseball and encountering a dog in the neighboring yard that turns out that they think is a monster. And it's a really sweet, charming movie I haven't seen in years. I don't want to watch it again because I'm afraid it's not going to live up to my childhood memories. But it's being celebrated. The 20th Century Fox is going to celebrate this by making a prequel to it. And this is odd for a number of reasons. We'll get those in a second. But David and Mickey Evans, the original film's writer and director, will co-write the script with first-time writer Austin Reynolds. And there are no real plot details released yet. But here's why I find this baffling. It's the same reason why I found that, yesterday's news of a 24 prequel series by young Jack Bauer baffling, which is that, like the first season of 24, Sandlot the movie is a prequel story where we are watching the origin story of these characters who grew up to be one a baseball star, one a baseball announcer. We are watching an extended flashback bookended by where these kids went. So this prequel clearly can't be about these kids because they all meet and have their coming together and their origin story in the movie itself. So the prequel will have to be about other people in the neighborhood, the dog, other characters, but all that undercuts what made The Sandlot. So I don't understand why this isn't a sequel. I don't understand why they don't try to bring back a lot of those same kids as the same actors or new actors and have them all reunite 25 years later in the 1980s, since that's so hot on TV right now. I do not understand this story. Ben, do you have any affection for The Sandlot? Do you even see what the appeal of a prequel to this movie could be?
I definitely have affection for The Sandlot. I grew up playing Little League Baseball, so I loved all of those baseball movies that seemed to permeate the 1990s, this and Rookie of the Year and all those kinds of films. I totally agree. I feel like they should bring back that cast, because if you're going to do this whole throwback thing of like, hey, remember this movie that came out in the 90s? You might as well, gear it toward and give the people who remember that movie something to latch onto, which is the return of those characters instead of, I feel like for the name brand recognition aspect of it to mean anything, the intended audience has to understand and be aware of where it came from. And I'm not sure that younger crowds know what this is. And also it's like, I feel like baseball movies in particular and just sports movies in general have fallen off a lot in recent years because it's more difficult to make those movies and market them to international audiences, which, as we know, is becoming increasingly more of a requirement for any movie to make its money back these days. So yeah, there's a lot about this that I'm sort of confused about. I did see somebody on Twitter, I think it was maybe Esquire.com, was talking about how if this is going to be a prequel, it should follow James Earl Jones's character, and he's like the kind old man who lives next door, who's the owner of the Beast, this big dog that the kids face, and he basically only pops up in the movie for like 10 minutes or something at the very end. So like maybe they could do something with that, but yeah, I totally agree. I feel like there's no way that these kids can be a part of this movie. So then, what is The Sandlot if not their relationship? It's not just the location. I don't know. Chris, did you grow up watching The Sandlot? Do you have any thoughts about this?
I did like The Sandlot when I was a kid, but yeah, this is a terrible idea. I don't know. Like you both said, a sequel would make more sense. A prequel, I really don't get it. I don't know.
All right.
Actually, what they should do is have a sequel where all the adults, all the grown-up kids, try to force all of their kids to be friends at The Sandlot, which would mimic how this generation tries to force all their kids to like what they liked and make it a meta commentary. I'd watch that.
Yeah, I like that idea. All right, well, let's talk about a sequel that actually does seem like a valid idea, and that's Top Gun 2. Chris, tell us about the latest casting news for this movie.
So Glen Powell, who's an actor in Everybody Wants Some and in Netflix's Set It Up, was one of 3 actors who was up for the role of Goose's son in Top Gun 2. The other 2 were Miles Teller and Nicholas Hoult. And ultimately, Miles Teller won out, even though it seems like the internet was really pulling for Glen Powell. And Glen Powell jokingly commented on losing the part on Twitter, and it was all, all fun, and we all thought, well, that's the last we'll hear of this. But as it turns out, Glen Powell actually is going to be in the movie after all. He's not playing Goose's son. We don't know who he's playing, but according to the report, Tom Cruise and the producers were so impressed with his audition that they added him to the film, and they're actually beefing up the minor role he's been cast in. So there you go. Everything worked out for everyone except Nicholas Hoult.
Yeah, I mean, so my first reaction to this is I feel like we're going to, I feel like they're going to immediately regret this decision, because by putting Glen Powell in this movie, especially right next to Miles Teller, who, as you mentioned, is cast as Goose's son, it's going to make the disparity between those two actors so much clearer. It's like, for me, I feel like unless Miles Teller does something to completely blow me away and like wildly change my perception of his abilities as an actor and the ability that he possesses to step into a franchise like this, I feel like I'm gonna walk out of this movie going, I can't believe Glen Powell was in that movie and playing the wrong role. Do you guys think that there's any other outcome for this?
I like Miles Teller, but he's not a charismatic guy. Glen Powell is charismatic. People are going to love what character he plays, which makes me wonder if Goose Jr., son of Goose, is not going to be a wild, charismatic guy. I wonder if he's going to be the more reserved, uptight guy, maybe to bounce off Maverick, played by Tom Cruise, and whoever Glen Powell is playing. So part of me is wondering if maybe this is a canny choice as opposed to, miscasting, but we shall see.
And as you were saying that, now I'm just wondering if maybe Glen Powell is going to be the Iceman to Goose's son's Maverick, I guess, yeah, like you're saying, sort of lean into that disparity. That could be an interesting thing. Have him be like the gunner or whatever the term was that Goose was for Maverick in the first movie. All right, so let's move on to our next option, or news story rather, and that is, they're making an It's a Small World movie. Walt Disney Company is actually putting time and money into this. It's based on the theme park ride, which if you've ever been to Disneyland and ridden the ride, I mean, you may have just skipped over it in the lines and all this. It's sort of tucked away into a back corner of the theme park, but it's the ride where basically it's a boat ride where you're just sort of like floating down a river that shows all these different cultures all around the world singing the same song over and over again. It's very catchy and it gets stuck in your head, and it's this crazy thing. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, but there's no story in this thing. So Peter recently spoke with John Turteltaub, who's the director of The Meg, the upcoming shark movie with Jason Statham, and Turteltaub years ago was attached to direct this It's a Small World movie, and Peter asked Turteltaub about the film, and Turteltaub said that he's still attached to direct this movie. And I'll read his quote here. He said, "I took my daughter on the ride this weekend, actually, last weekend. Anyone who says making a movie based on the Small World ride is ridiculous is completely right, which is why it's really tricky to figure it out, because there's a way where it's not ridiculous, when in fact it's pretty clever and delightful. We're working on the clever and delightful version, and that's going to take more time than the really ridiculous bad version." And Peter asked about what the logline was, and he said, "I think we know it's very emotional because it's a world of laughter and a world of tears," which are lyrics from the earworm song that happens during the ride. So that's basically it. But I mean, Jacob, I know you're a big theme park guy. Do you think there's any way, I mean, just the notion of making a clever and delightful version of It's a Small World, I don't see how that's possible, but maybe I'm short-sighted. Do you feel like there's any potential in this property to be adapted into a movie?
No, not at all. And I just want to point out that, like, before I go on into this, there's no understating what an important accomplishment It's a Small World is. Walt Disney and his team designed it for the 1964 World Fair. It was imported to Disneyland, Disney World, all their Disney parks. It essentially invented the modern boat ride. If you get on a boat ride, a theme park where you're not on a track, but in a flume and the water is pushing you through the ride, this ride invented that. It is a technical accomplishment that was years ahead of its time, super important. It's still charming and cute to this day, even though people like to pretend they're above it. It is one of the defining pinnacles of theme park design. But you're right, there is no story here. And unlike Pirates of the Caribbean, which has a natural dramatic hook. Here are pirates. Pirates are bad. They're attacking this town. or Haunted Mansion. You are in a house full of ghosts. Do they mean you harm, or they just want to party? Even Jungle Cruise. You are in the jungle on a boat surrounded by animals. There is inherent conflict in that, and that's why Dwayne Johnson is currently starring in a film version of that's being shot. But this is literally a UNICEF sponsored ride built for a World Fair over 50 years ago, where the point of the ride was to raise money for children by displaying a world without conflict and a world where children are united despite language barriers through song. That is wonderful. That is charming. That is not a movie. And whatever version Turteltaub is cooking up here, it may be something, but it's not going to be It's a Small World. And I don't know what that's going to be, because maybe sometimes a Disney theme park ride is just a theme park ride, and they should go to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, another ride that has no plot, until you look into Disney lore and discover that it does. Like, you dig deep in every single Disney ride, and so many of them have hidden stories and hidden lore and hidden secrets and hidden characters, and so many of them are built. Even Space Mountain, which was in development for years, has a secret story if you actually dig into it, the notes that all the designers made years and years ago. It's Small World does not. It's one of the very few Disney rides that's not based in a movie, that has no actual narrative function. So Turteltaub, I think he has great answers here. I think he's a really nice guy. When you read his full interview in a few days, he comes off as like a real gem of a human being. I want to talk to him. He seems like a lot of fun. I do not think this movie's ever going to happen, and I think Turteltaub probably knows it.
All right, so let's move on to Terminator 6. We got a first official look at the women of this movie this morning, and I know we're probably not going to dig into this too much, but I thought it would be cool to talk about. So Chris, tell us about this. You wrote up this photo for the site.
Yes, so the photo depicts Natalia Reyes, Mackenzie Davis, and Linda Hamilton, and much like that Dark Universe photo that came out a year ago, it's clear that all three of these women were not in the same photo at the same time, and they were photoshopped together. I don't want to be too hard on this because it's a promotional photo. It's not like it's not a scene from the movie, and it's cool to see Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor again with all decked out, and Mackenzie Davis has very impressive biceps, and it's a okay first look at the film, but it doesn't really tell us really anything about the film. What we know about the film is it's basically taking the same approach as the new Halloween movie, whereas it's focusing only on the good movies, Terminator 1 and 2, and it's ignoring all the sequels. So it's one of those things where it's like a reboot / continuation, which seems to be like the new trend for sequels now.
Yeah, and you can read more about the plot and what we know about the film so far in the article that we'll link in the show notes. I feel like Paramount has definitely learned their lesson, though, because I don't know if you guys remember, I'm sure you do, the photo shoot for Terminator Genesis that I think that was like Entertainment Weekly or something. Those photos that came out before that movie and before the trailer dropped for that movie are so comical that they still get passed around as jokes today. So, I mean, this photo is like miles beyond anything that we saw in that photo shoot, which is just so over the top and cartoonish and really ridiculous. It's like everyone holding a gun and screaming, basically. This is a lot more reserved, and yes, Linda Hamilton looks pretty badass in it. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that so you guys can check that out in the link in the show notes. Let's talk about the last news story of the day, and that is that a Super Pets movie is in development. Chris, I've never heard of Super Pets. What is this? What's happening?
So various DC characters have their own pets. There's, Crypto, which is Superman's dog. There's Ace the Bat Hound, which is Batman's dog. There's a Bat Cow. I'm not making that up. That's a real thing. Batman had his own cow. There's a super horse. There's all sorts of animals. So there was a comic back in the day called it was called Legion of the Super Pets, and there was also an animated series somewhat recently called Super Pets. And Warner Brothers and DC, who have not had the best luck when it comes to their live action comic book films, are apparently trying anything at this point. So they're making a animated Super Pets movie with Jared Stern, who wrote the Lego Batman movie, is going to write and direct it. And obviously this is going to be, geared towards kids, but it's clear that, DC has been having a lot more success with their lighthearted kid fare than their very serious adult stuff, because, everyone loved the Lego Batman movie, and even the recently released Teen Titans Go to the Movies has had surprisingly great reviews. So maybe, they're learning that they should focus more on family-friendly fare, so they're doing this now.
Jacob, I know you're a big comics guy. Have you ever encountered this Bat Cow or any of these other? I mean, I've heard of Crypto the Super Dog, but have you heard of any of these other more obscure super pets?
I'm so glad you asked. Most of these pets were created during the Silver Age of comic books, which is sort of nebulously the 50s through the 70s-ish, sort of between the introductory years, but before comics kind of came of age and became darker, so to speak, in the 80s. And this is the silliest years for DC and Marvel. This is the years when everybody had a dog and everybody had a horse and everybody had a pet. And so I think there's two directions to go with this. One is you make it a super silly, fun, family-friendly thing, and that's awesome. That's great. Go with it. Kids are superheroes too. But I'm also reminded that there very recently, I guess maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a really smart reinvention of Crypto, Superman's dog, where instead of being just a dog with a cape, they had this whole flashback issue. I think it was when Grant Morrison was writing Action Comics, where it was revealed that Kal-El's family dog was defending the family in a science experiment gone wrong, and they trapped in the Phantom Zone. And then years later, when Superman's an adult, he frees his family dog. And so it's like this alien dog who's really badass. And that was the reinvention of Crypto as being like a way for this hyper-intelligent alien dog with superpowers to exist in the current continuity without being just a dog with powers. So there's ways you can actually take these animals and maybe make them a bit more grounded, a bit more serious. But either way you cut it, it's still silly. But I guess to address Bat Cow, though, Bat Cow is actually very recent. And I'm sure someone who's smarter than me will maybe put me off if I'm incorrect here, but I think this is another Grant Morrison creation when he was writing Batman before he was writing Action Comics, where literally the current Robin, who is Damian Wayne, Batman's son, literally adopts a cow and won't let anybody harm it. And for years, you saw Bat Cow just chilling in the corner of the Batcave eating hay. And it was just, it doesn't even have powers. He was just there. But so I would love to see a movie where all these superpowered animals fighting crime and Bat Cow just hanging out.
That would be so great. Just have him as like an Easter egg in the background. That's the kind of ridiculous stuff that I love. That can really only happen in comic books. But hopefully they translate something like that to the big screen. All right, so let's move into our feature presentation, and that is Mondo has released a Fight Club card game. And Jacob, I know you're a big board gamer, tabletop gamer, all of that stuff, and you're a big Mondo aficionado. And I just wanted to give you a spotlight to talk about this for a second. You wrote this really cool feature that also features or includes a bunch of other card games that movie fans might love. So tell us about this Fight Club card game, and maybe give us like a rundown of one or two other games that might be similar that people might dig.
Yeah, this is Mondo's second board game following their adaptation of The Thing that came out last year. And Fight Club, it's actually called Fight Club the Home Game. I'm gonna read the quick description from Mondo's site. Take on the role of either the narrator or Tyler Durden as you play a game of tug of war with dual-use cards available in a shared draw row. The narrator side feels the need to collect, gather, and nest, while Tyler's side enables destruction, mayhem, and ultimately letting go by hitting bottom on a shared track where both players struggle to dominate. And this is it's a deck builder game. For those of you who are unfamiliar, and I go into greater length in the article if you're interested, a deck builder game is a very popular genre of game where you start with a very basic hand of cards, and there's a shared shop of cards in the middle of the table. And all players can use resources to buy cards to change their deck up, add more powers, try to create combos of various cards. And some games are very simple and straightforward, like Dominion is very popular for those of you who know board games, a game like creating Medieval Kingdom. And some of them sort of build off that to become more complex. But so this is Mondo working in a very, very popular genre of game. And I really like this concept because when Mondo first announced they're making a Fight Club card game, I pictured to sort of take that card game where like you're fighting in an underground pit and this card's a punch, this card's a jab, this is a kick. And I thought, oh, that sounds unpleasant. I don't want that. That's not what the point of Fight Club is. But the fact that this is a two-player card game where the table space is the mind of one person, you're both battling for control of it, with the chaos versus civilization conflict of the movie, actually understands the people at Mondo understand Fight Club more than most of Fight Club's fans do. And that's really interesting. I mean, the caveats I'll use here is that Mondo's first game, The Thing, I like it a lot. Our own Peter Sreda, another board game aficionado, does not, and he thinks it's a broken game. I think it's a flawed game, but it was definitely a case where Mondo valued theme over a truly coherent, flawless game design. And they entered into a very crowded space. The thing was another in a long line of hidden traitor games, where one player is trying to betray the group and destroy the game. And now they're entering another crowd space, which is deck builders. The problem with this is that these are game genres that are so crowded with near perfect games that if you aren't near perfect, you're going to get lost. And they have the Mondo name, and that's going to go a long way toward maybe attracting people who aren't board gamers, who just want the Mondo thing. And Peter's written about this before, and you can read that in the show notes. But Mondo has done a poor job of reaching out to the gaming community. Things that are like commonplace for other board games, like other board games would have had a gameplay video up a year ago, would have had pictures of the cards and board up a year ago. They would have YouTubers who explain rules and do game reviews and playthroughs would have had this game in their hands months ago and would have been building up hype for it. They would be at gaming conventions showing off, but Mondo is not. And they first announced these official details about a month before it comes out. This is really unusual and unheard of in the board game space, which is very competitive, and it's always expensive too. These designer games are expensive, so it's a case where this sounds fantastic. This sounds like a really cool thing, but Mondo is not as great a company as they are, and as amazing as the products they put out, especially on the poster side. I really hope they see this opportunity to really touch base with what board gamers expect from board game companies these days, because they're not doing it. I'm curious if this makes sense to Ben and Chris, because I know you guys really aren't big board gamers. Is this something that's I'm obsessing about that makes sense, or is it just me talking nonsense?
I mean, no, that all of that, I'm glad you were on, because I feel like all of that is like very necessary context, because I didn't know any of this stuff, so I feel like I at least have a handle on what's going on here. But Chris, I'm interested, does this sound like something that you would actually be interested in playing? I know you're a big David Fincher fan. Does the fact that this is a Fight Club game carry any weight with you? And I can't really, I mean, I'll be honest, I can't really imagine you sitting down and playing a card game. It just doesn't seem like, from what I know of your personality, that's something that you do. But tell me if I'm wrong. Are you interested in this?
Is it for two players? I can't remember. If it's for two players, I'm vaguely interested in it, because the only time I play games, it's like, with my wife. We don't have like big groups of friends we play games with. So anytime there's like a 2-player game, I'm vaguely interested in it. But as with video games, any sort of board game or card game, I tend to play it for about like 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'm like, all right, what else can I do? Because I'm not in the mood to do this. So I don't think I'm built for gaming, really.
Okay. Jacob, do you know the answer to that? Like, how many players are intended for this game? Like, what the ideal number is?
It is a 2-player only game, which is actually fine by me, because sometimes you'll play games that like unnecessarily add on 3 or 4 players just to get those numbers in the box, and they break the game design. So this game kind of admitting, it's 2 players only, is actually a sign that's a solid design, and they're not trying to stretch that number just to sell more copies.
Cool. So that's Fight Club, the home game, and that's coming out in September. Really quickly before we go, Jacob, just tell us about maybe one of the other games that you mentioned here in this article that might be good for people who are also, big movie fans who might find something interesting to like here.
All right. Rather than one, I'm going to do 3 in one sentence.
Okay.
These are all deck building games like Fight Club. So if you like the idea of building up a deck of cards and building one strategically and defeating your opponents, these all work. These are all 3 of my favorites. Arctic Scavengers, for fans of Mad Max. You are building a tribe of survivors in the apocalypse. You can battle each other for resources. It's great. Xenoshift Onslaught, terrible title, but it's cooperative. Everybody works together at the same time against the game. So you're not building a deck in isolation. You're constantly talking and constantly trying to find ways to defend your base against aliens. It's very much inspired by Starship Troopers, and lots of chaos. It's very fun because it's cooperative, very hard. Mystic Vale, super relaxing, incredibly chill game of being a druid, trying to bring life back to a dead valley. You plant trees, you raise animals, and instead of building a deck, you build cards. Each of your cards is inside its own plastic sleeve, and you insert transparent upgrades inside the sleeve to transform what your card looks like, and therefore it's unlike any deck builder I've ever played. All 3 of these are great, and if you don't like Fight Club, but like the idea of a game like this, these 3, you can't go wrong with them.
Awesome. Wow, that's very comprehensive. So yeah, you guys can find more about all the stories we mentioned today at slashfilm.com and linked inside the show notes. Before we end this podcast, where can people find more of your work online? Jacob, let's start with you.
I'm on slashfilm.com every single day, and I'm on Twitter, where I'm at Jacob S. Hall.
Chris?
I am also on Slashfilm, and I'm on Twitter at Evangelista 413.
You can find me writing at slashfilm.com as well. I am on Twitter at Ben Pears, and you can subscribe to Slash Film Daily on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. The show is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find at the site. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com, and make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. That truly helps us out a ton. Tell your friends, spread the word about the show, and we'll talk to you next time.